Dr. Amanda. I should introduce myself to those who don't know me. I'm one of the owners of Whole Body Health with my brother, Dr. Tim. And what our clinic is about is helping people get better naturally. And it's a very different type of clinic than most people are familiar with, because most people go to doctors and they I like to say they put tape over their check engine light, right? You take a drug and it covers up a symptom. And what we're really passionate about is teaching people how to help their body heal itself. And the really cool thing is the body can do that, but we have to put the right things in it. We have to make the environment right for the body to be able to do that. So who here is new to the Weston Price Foundation? Raise your hand if you've never heard of it. Okay. I like to hear that. Now, I always have a hard time figuring this thing out, so bear with me. Oh, it's got it. There you go. Okay. The Weston A. Price Foundation is based on the work of Dr. Weston Price, and he was a dentist in the 1930s that lived in Cleveland, actually. And he was at the top of his field, and he was very interested in nutrition. And one of the things when you look back in history, dentists back then were very interested in nutrition because the teeth were kind of a window into the body. Someone who had very poor nutrition had very unhealthy teeth. Someone who had very good nutrition had very healthy teeth and didn't get cavities. And what Dr. Price did was he traveled all around the world and studied healthy traditional cultures. So he went to Switzerland, he went to the British Isles, he went to South America, he went to the Pacific Islands, he went to Alaska. And what he found when he studied healthy traditional cultures is they all did things in a similar way. And what he did was he put together principles of a healthy traditional diet. All of these cultures, no matter where they were in the world, had learned that if they eat these foods, they'll be healthy. And so one of the principles that he found we're going to talk about tonight. But some of the other ones, especially if you're a patient here, you're kind of familiar with, they ate a lot of fat. They got a lot of fat-soluble vitamins. They ate a lot of minerals. They fermented their foods. And we do hour-long lectures on every single one of these. And so if this is something that interests you, plug into our office, see Natalie. We do lots of education every single month, and we talk about all this. What we're going to talk about tonight is how they prepared their grains. And how many people here think grains are bad? Have been told grains are bad, have cut them out of their diet, and they started feeling better, okay? This is a modern phenomenon because people have been eating grains for over 10,000 years. In fact, they've been credited with the growth of a civilization, okay? And there's reasons for that. Grains are seeds, okay? And a seed is a wonderful thing because if conditions are not right for that seed to grow, it's able to store for a really long time. And this is one of the reasons that civilization grew off of grains, because it was a food that they could store and use later on. Now, if conditions are right, that grain, like if you plant it in the ground and if there's moisture and there's warmth, the grain will sprout and grow into a tree. It's really an amazing thing. Now, there are things that protect and preserve the grain when conditions are not right that impair digestion, okay? And if we don't prepare these grains properly before we eat them, it impairs digestion. So this is the first thing I want to talk about. And tonight's meeting's going to be a little different because I'm going to give you a quick tutorial, and then we're going to show you how to do it, okay? So grains have something called anti-nutrients in them. Does anybody in the audience know what that means? You know what an anti-nutrient is? It's something that instead of giving you nutrition, pulls nutrition away. And these are the things that protect that seed from sprouting when conditions are not right. So they have enzyme inhibitors. Enzyme are specialized proteins that start reactions. They also have something called phytic acid. I'm going to get into phytic acid a little bit more in a minute. Phytic acid holds on to nutrients. And when phytic acid is present, you can't absorb nutrients. When phytic acid is not present, when you break the phytic acid down, it releases nutrients. It has tannins and glutens, which are big proteins that are hard to digest, and complex sugars that also are hard to digest. Now, phytic acid is the big one we're going to talk about tonight. Because we're going to talk about how to release the nutrition in grains. Come on in, guys. Go ahead and take a seat right in the front here. There you go.
Yeah, last guy has to sit up front.
Nobody else wanted to. Okay, guys. Just to give you a recap, we're talking about grains, and we're talking about how to make them more digestible. We're kind of talking about the history of why people think grains are bad. And what we're starting with are the things that are in grains that preserve them when the conditions are not right for them to be planted. Okay? And then when the conditions are right, it releases these things. So phytic acid is something that preserves nutrients inside of a seed. And it kind of looks like a snowflake. And in that snowflake, it grabs on to nutrients and minerals. And so this is a picture of phytic acid, and attached to the phytic acid are really important minerals and nutrients like phosphorus and zinc, magnesium and calcium. Now, when a seed is planted in the ground and we have warmth and we have moisture, what happens is the enzyme inhibitors, the things that prevent enzymes from working, get dissolved. And when those enzyme inhibitors get dissolved, the enzymes start waking up the grain. And the enzymes start breaking down phytic acid. When the phytic acid starts breaking down, all these nutrients that are attached to the phytic acid are released. And then the grain sprouts. Okay? And if it's in the ground and it sprouts, it grows a plant. If it's on our table and it sprouts, it becomes more digestible. Okay? Now, if we eat a grain and we haven't broken down this phytic acid and we haven't done anything about the enzyme inhibitors, when we eat that grain, it's going to damage our gut. Okay? It's going to inflame our gut, it's going to irritate our gut, and it'll grab onto nutrients and pull them out. Okay? So what do? To get rid of the phytic acid, get rid of all those anti-nutrients, and make the grains more digestible, we have to soak and we have to sprout them. Okay? Debbie's going to talk to you about this in just a minute, but just to go through all the things that it does is it deactivates the inhibitors, it neutralizes the phytic acid, and then it does all these other things. It also breaks down gluten. Gluten isn't a bad thing. It is for less than 1% of the population who has celiac disease, but for many people, it bothers their digestion if their gut is bad, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So, traditional cultures knew how to prepare their grains. And they did a much better job of it than we do. And this is why grains were so important to them. So, the traditional cultures went through a very different process of getting their grains ready to eat than we go through. They took seeds that were ancient seeds, and they grew them in fertile, well-maintained soil to start with. Then they manually harvested the grains and stone ground them without heat to get the parts of the grain off that are really hard to digest. They manually sifted to remove the parts that are completely undigestible. And then they soaked and broke down that phytic acid and enzyme inhibitors that we talked about. And finally, they used slow-rising yeast and sourdough starters, bacterial cultures, to get into that grain and break down the hard-to-digest proteins like gluten. Sounds like a pretty arduous process, right? Do you think our modern society of we want it now does that? No, and this is the problem with modern grains. This is why, for many of you who are patients in our office, I've told you to stop eating grains, right? Because we don't do it this way. This is how we do it. And this is 90% of the grains that you'll buy in a grocery store. Instead of growing ancient seeds in fertile soil, we're taking modern hybridized seeds that we've kind of cross-pollinated to make them more convenient for us, maybe make it shorter to fit our farm equipment, that kind of thing. And we grow it in depleted topsoil. Because we're not growing it in nutrient-rich soil, it's not as strong of a plant. We have to use things like fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and those are on the product, and we get that in our body. Then we mechanically harvest it as quick as we can, and we rapidly grind it using high heat machines that destroy the enzymes in the product that help us digest it. And then we use fast rising yeasts that don't take the time to break down the complex proteins and complex sugars in the product. And then if we didn't go far enough, we bleach it. And we destroy any of the remaining 500 nutrients that are found in grains. After we bleach it, we fortify it with 5 to 7 synthetic man-made nutrients, and we call it enriched, right? So this kind of makes sense as to why we tell you not to eat grains, okay? I don't want to eat that kind of stuff. And whenever people are like, oh, I love my grains, I kind of say, well, we need to learn a little bit more about it. And because of the modern grain, and oh, here's a little example for you. So it starts as a whole grain, and then they stone grind it, okay? And they separate the bran, the middlings, and the wheat germ. Now, there's coarse bran, which we get rid of, but the rest of the bran is high in nutrition. And that's the part of the grain that is actually the highest in nutrition. It's also the part of the grain that's the highest in phytic acid, okay? Wheat germ is very high in fat-soluble vitamins and antioxidants, okay? Wheat germ oil is something we use a lot to give our patients antioxidants, vitamin E, and things like that. In the modern processing, we get rid of all that stuff, right? And we turn it into white bleached flour, and that's what we end up with. Many of you have probably had white flour in your cupboard for 5, 6, 7 years, right? And the pests don't go in it. You don't find any ants in that. You don't find any bugs in that. It's because there's no good stuff in it. There's no nutrients in that. And these foods are damaging to our digestive tracts. Okay? And when we eat a diet that's high in these foods, we get problems. And tonight we're going to be talking about sprouting grains. And for those of you in the audience that have healthy guts and feel pretty good generally, this is for you. For those of you in the audience that don't have healthy guts, who do not feel good, who feel sick a lot, have low energy, that kind of thing, this is not for you, okay? And I'm going to talk about how you can heal your gut a little bit before we get into this. But what happens when we eat a diet that's rich in processed foods with lots of anti-nutrients in them and little to no nutrition is we disrupt our gut lining and we damage our gut, okay? And when we damage it enough, what happens is we start getting improper absorption of the nutrients and minerals in our food. So not only did we damage our gut with this food that's not good for us, it's preventing us from absorbing nutrients from other foods that are good for us, okay? Leads to inflammation, leads to leaky gut, leads to food intolerances. People with leaky gut are the people who get autoimmune diseases, okay? So I'm just gonna real quickly tell you about how the gut works. Inside your gut is the outside of your body. Just because you eat a food doesn't mean the nutrients and minerals in that food are yours. You have to break that food down, you have to absorb it, and then you have to get it so small, you have to get it in such small particles that it has to get through the extremely tight junctions on the lining of your colon. And then it gets into your bloodstream and you can use that nutrition. What happens when we eat food that's processed like white flour, and we take antibiotics, and we eat lots of sugar, and all these kind of things, is we damage the lining of our gut. And if that gut is irritated for too long and we lose the thick biofilm of good bacteria that's supposed to be on that from taking too many antibiotics and things like that, those tight junctions get looser. And then they start letting bigger molecules into your bloodstream. Gluten is a bigger molecule, okay? And so this is one of the reasons everybody's saying gluten-free, gluten-free, gluten-free. Because the gut lining is damaged, they can't digest that gluten, it gets into their bloodstream and they get problems, okay? If this gets bad enough, it turns into an autoimmune. And for each person with their differing physiology and their individual body, it depends on their genetics which autoimmune disease they get, okay? So if you're someone like that in the audience tonight, you have to rebuild your gut before you can re-enter foods that have complex proteins like gluten and have some things like phytic acid in it, okay? So for a short period of time, you eliminate all grains and starches from the diet, drastically reduce sugar intake, avoid antibiotics because we need that good bacteria in our gut for us to be able to digest it, and then supplement with things that heal the gut, and you know about this, broth, probiotics, enzymes, okay? So I'm going to end my short little tutorial with a little joke. It's just been discovered that 10% of the population is allergic to gluten, and 90% of the population is sick of hearing about it. Okay? I'm sick of hearing about it. I swear, every other patient that comes in that's gut is a mess. They say, I went to my doctor, they want to test me for celiacs. And I think to myself, so few people have celiacs. So many people have damaged guts because of our lifestyles, okay? And this is why we don't do a lot of allergy testing in our office. We work on healing the gut first. We work on getting nutritive food back in the diet. And when we do that and we get better, those allergies go away, the sensitivities get better, and we start being able to digest foods. And so once we get our guts into a place where it's healthy and we can start digesting food better, then we re-enter some of this stuff in. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring up Debbie. Debbie is the manager of our Whole Body Health Food store, and she is a health food enthusiast and homemaker. And she's been learning about traditional foods and traditional preparation of foods for many, many years. And she's kind of self-taught, right? I mean, you've been doing all this yourself.
We've been members of the Weston Price Foundation for probably 12 years, from almost the very beginning. And yeah, it's been exciting.
Debbie
Then
is
we
taught-
take it to the kitchen, right?
Debbie has taught Dr. Tim and I so much wisdom, and we've applied it in our practice. And when we started applying some of the things that you taught us and some of the things we learned through the Weston Price Foundation, we started seeing amazing things in our practice. And so Debbie's going to show you how to sprout some of your own grains. And so for those of you that can eat grains and that feel good about eating grains, we're going to show you how to soak some rice. We're going to show you how to soak some oatmeal. And we're going to show you how to make some pancakes. And then we have some samples for you. Awesome.
Great.
Take it away, Debbie. I'll just be your assistant.
Wonderful. Yeah, as Dr. Amanda said, well, the title of this lecture, this presentation tonight, is Unwinding the Nutrition in Grains, Beans, Nuts. And unwinding, that would imply that things are tightly wound up and locked. And that's exactly what you were telling us. And so how is it that we take these wonderful rudimentary gifts of nature and get them bioavailable to us, digestible? This is really important for children because children need the carbohydrates and the nutrients that are in grains. And but young children cannot digest them. It's very, very damaging to the gut for a child to be started on rice or something very, very early because they don't produce the enzymes necessary. So anyway, we're going to talk about unwinding these things. Yeah, the right way. First of all, you want to begin with clean or as high quality of a grain as you possibly can. Clean, organic, probably heirloom if you can get it. By heirloom, I mean something that's not been hybridized. One of them, and all these heirloom grains are so exciting because they have a story behind them. Kamut is one of them. This is one that comes from Egypt. The story of all the kamut that's grown in the West is that a GI, when he was stationed in Egypt, an American GI, got to go into one of the pyramids, and he saw some, his father was a wheat farmer in North Dakota. He saw some grains on the ground, and he picked them up and slid them in his pocket, got them back to his dad, and all of the kamut, that is, or it's also called Khorasan, Khorasan, all of that is grown in now everywhere in the world is from that ancient Egypt little stash that that gentleman snatched for us, and it was preserved. So as Dr. Amanda was saying, because of the phytic acid, because of that protective coating, this was preserved for centuries. And we think that we can just put it in our mouth and chew it and we're going to be able to digest it. No, it's got too much of a hard armor coating on it. Another great one is the einkorn. This is an einkorn berry. This is an ancient form of wheat that is grown in Italy. Now a lot of these hybrid, non-hybridized heirloom ancient grains have much less gluten, fabulous flavor. We've got one flour out there called Red Fife, and that, I believe, tracks all the way back to Scotland. So it's fun when they all have a story.
So let me ask you, what would you use the canut to make?
Well, you can cook it like rice, you can grind it, you can, like flour, and then treat it, or you can sprout it, soak it and sprout it. So, you know, we have out in the store, we have, I think there's a bread out there that is, the buns and hot dog buns, I think, are made with coarse wheat. So,
and then the einkorn?
The einkorn, same thing, you can cook it like rice, you can sprout it.
There's a little picture on there.
Yeah, there's
somebody made a
porridge,
salad and put that in there.
Bread, so
porridge.
Yeah, little bit of salad, right. Yeah, so those are the ancient ones. So look for something like that. It just makes it interesting, and you'll notice they all have a different flavor to them. So simple. We got you have oats. Okay, here's 1-to-1. I'm using a half a cup of oats here. This is the night before you want to make porridge. 1/2 cup, however much you need for your family. We're just doing half a cup. And then a half a cup of water. So let me make sure I'm doing a half a cup. All right. Okay. Of course, we didn't bring down any stuff. Oh, here's a fork. Okay. So you'll mix that. So it's 1-to-1, or till it looks like it's saturated. And then you want to add, this is with the oats, 1-to-1. Then you want to add some type of acidic medium, and that is going to be what breaks down that phytic acid. Apple cider vinegar. So for every cup, you use a teaspoon. So we're using half a cup, half a teaspoon. You could do apple cider vinegar, you can use lemon juice, you can use buttermilk, yogurt, kefir, whey, whatever you want. I'm just going to use some apple cider vinegar.
And for all of you guys, we do have recipes for you that are writing this down, so we'll have all of that for you.
So half a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, and then you're going to just put that in and stir it all around.
And I would like to mention, we talked about people who have gut damage. You can heal the gut. It takes some time. It takes about 6 months to a year for most people who have significant gut damage, but that doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to eat grains again. Once you get your gut healed, you can eat grains like this again, and that's really our goal with most people, to get them being able to have a diet that's rich in all different foods. It's
economical. Yeah, we would all love to be able to eat grass-fed meat and really rich, wonderful things every single day, but when you're on a budget, you have to figure out a way that you can eat grains once your gut is healed, as you're saying. So that's it. You leave that at room temperature until the next morning. Then you add half again. In the morning, you'll put it in a pan. Don't microwave it. You're going to remove all of the nutrients. Yes.
Do you drain that liquid that you soaked it in, or rinse it at all?
No, you don't. Because, first of all, the oats are going to absorb every bit of it. So no, there wouldn't really be any way of draining it.
So the phytic acid is removed. That was one question I've had. It's dissolved and no longer a problem, even though you're not removing it.
Yeah, once it's warm and you have a little bit of acidity, those enzymes are activated and they break down the phytic acid.
It actually destroyed it. Okay. I didn't know you physically had to remove it, but it's broken down.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
It's dissolved or deactivated, right. So that's it. That's so easy, and it takes a minute. Do it right before you go to bed. Next morning, put it in a pan, or you could even do this in a pan. You don't even have to dirty another bowl. Do this right in your saucepan, and then you're going to add more water, salt, bring it up to a boil, and turn it down 5 minutes. So it's really speedy, a speedy procedure. And you can probably add, it will thicken, you may have to add a little bit more water, but that's the oats. Yeah.
And whenever you're eating grains, you always want to eat them with fat because it's the fat-soluble vitamins that help us absorb minerals and the minerals that are unlocked once we soak and sprout these. So don't be afraid of eating it with a nice big tablespoon of butter because that's also going to help to keep your blood sugar stabilized because you're eating carbohydrates. So don't be afraid to do that.
Butter, cream, yeah.
Oh, cream. Yeah, we have wonderful cream here.
Right. So that's oats. Pretty simple, yes.
Are you boiling it for 5 minutes or just?
No, bring it up to boil and then simmer, right. So that's our oats.
One more question?
I was just going to comment, we make oatmeal for our boy like that, and instead of water in the morning, we use bone broth.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
great.
And,
Yeah.
he snuck it in at first, but then he saw me doing it, and now he likes it.
Yeah, we're going to talk
Great
about that
idea.
when you make rice. And
Yeah,
bone
but-
broth makes it more digestible.
Wonderful.
That's great.
That's a great suggestion. All right. Now we're going to show you how to do some pancakes. This is, again, a very simple overnight pancake. You take your blender. You don't have to have a fancy Vitamix. You can just be a regular old blender. But this is where you use your whole grains. You can use your einkorn and your kamut and millet, brown rice. You don't have to do anything to them. We're going to put, these are some oats. And this is some buckwheat. Buckwheat, of course, is gluten-free pseudo grain. Half a cup of each. And we have this recipe that we will distribute to you.
We also have samples.
We have
for you guys.
samples of these, right. So let me make sure I'm getting them right.
Oh, you're good at that.
Okay. And then, oh, you know what? I use this as a measure. And then a cup of buttermilk. So this is a cup of buttermilk.
We have the buttermilk here in the store.
This is wonderful from Kelowna. They're out in Iowa. It's terrific. Okay, that's buttermilk. Okay, and then you can add vanilla. When you use buckwheat, I don't really think the vanilla enhances it very much. You can add that. And then, so half a cup of each grain. This is, you know, if your family's bigger, I'm going to do more. And then, are we plugged in?
We're plugged in.
We are plugged in.
All
right. And with a regular blender, it will grind the grains also. You don't need a big, strong Vitamix. With the regular blender, you go for 3 minutes. With the Vitamix, obviously not so long. That's it. Then you leave it in the blender overnight. That will break down your phytic acid. It's the buttermilk that's the acidic portion. And in the morning, then you're going to add a little bit of olive oil, probably some more buttermilk because it will thicken, your egg, or you can make a flax egg if somebody is sensitive to eggs. A flax egg is flaxseed and water ground together, and you let that sit for about 5 minutes, and it gels up and kind of makes an egg. Or you can make a chia egg, chia seed egg, same thing, and some salt. And then you have, we made little, well actually there were quite a few more, but the staff got to.
Yeah.
So that amount made a whole big tray of these little silver dollar pancakes. So these are buckwheat, buttermilk, and oats. So they're coming around. And that's super simple, because in the morning all you have to do is heat your griddle and go for it. Yes?
What exactly is buttermilk?
Buttermilk is cultured milk. Historically, Buttermilk would be the milk that was left over when they churned butter, so it would be a thinner milk. Now, in modern times, it's a milk that has a sour taste to it because there's a culture introduced to it. So it's broken down and it's soured and it has, I think it says cultured buttermilk. Yeah, cultured sweet cream buttermilk. So that's what it is. All right. And you don't have to use buttermilk. You can use yogurt, milk kefir, any of those things. So that's pretty darn simple.
So you're not refrigerating that overnight,
Nope.
you said?
Mm-mm.
How about the buttermilk itself? Is that refrigerated?
Yes, the buttermilk is refrigerated. All right, so that's our pancake. So yeah, get those. Yes.
In your Vitamix, are you using the grain blade on there or just
No,
using regular blade?
it's just regular. Because it would be a normal blender, you would grind it, like I said, for 3 minutes and it'll take care of that. So that when you see whole grains, you know these are not going to go rancid. If you already buy something ground up and the oils are in it, remember that picture that Dr. Amanda showed of you get to the white flour and nothing's going to even infest it because there's nothing in it. But when you buy whole grains that are already ground, you have to use them rapidly because they will go rancid. So
Store them in the refrigerator,
Right.
probably, yeah.
Exactly.
It's the wheat germ that's in there that they
Yeah.
want to get to because it has so much nutrition in it.
Right.
And since this is
So-
a whole grain, you're getting all of it.
So here's your whole grain, and it's going to have a very long shelf life because it's a whole grain. So you know that would be the way that you can utilize them. There. Okay, now rice. Rice is extremely interesting. Here we have some brown rice, half a cup. You're going to want to go with rice 3 times as much water. So we're going to want to put a cup and a half of water in here. And that's good. And then, if you're going to cook the rice, like if you do this in the morning, you can cook it in the evening, or if you do it the night before, you can move forward. But if you're going to cook it, you're going to add an acidic medium. If you leave it long enough, it will germinate, depending on what temperature you've put it at. You've stored it at. So some people put it on like a little heating pad, or if you happen to have a stove that has a pilot light or some warmth, you can actually germinate rice, and then you have this amazing product called GABA rice. Anybody hear of GABA, G-A-B-A? It's a mood lifter for your brain. And sprouted rice is very high in GABA. Actually, this is such a wonderful thing how the free market is starting to work because there's a demand for this type of thing. The company Zojirishi that makes rice cookers, it's a Japanese company, they actually have a rice cooker that will hold the rice at a higher temperature for a certain amount of time until it germinates, and then you can move forward and cook it. So you can start with your own plain old rice. You don't have to spend money on the sprouted rice, and it will germinate right in that rice cooker. Or you can, if you're going to leave it at room temperature, you do have to go through a series of rinsing and freshening and rinsing and freshening because you don't want it to get too sour.
And Debbie, how long does that normally take?
If you just leave it at room temperature without any heat enhancement, it could take 4 days.
Okay, and you're rinsing it every single day?
Mm-hmm. Now there's all kinds of directions out there. Somebody's got the better way, and there is one method where you leave it in that same rice water, and then you keep that rice water, and every time you soak rice, you